Hello, you crazy YouTubers, welcome to my channel. This is SheikyPets, and today I'm going to do a Q&A or frequently asked questions about two of my most popular videos, and that is how to make cage liners. So it is my #1 and 2 most popular videos. Thank you guys for the support. It's still to this day the most commented on, and you guys keep commenting on it quite frequently, which I'm grateful for. And you guys asked me a ton of questions, so I decided to, instead of continuously answering your questions, that I would do this Q&A. It'll be more in detail. It'll be kind of like face-to-face. And let's get started on those questions. I just wrote down a bunch of you guys' questions, and I'm just going to answer them one by one. If you guys have any other questions that aren't answered in this video, just leave a comment below and I will answer them for you. So the biggest question of them all, the most frequently asked question of them all is, where do I get my U-Haul? Where can you get U-Haul? So U-Haul, if you're not sure, is the absorbent layer that I use in my cage liners, and a lot of other people do as well. So where I get U-Haul is actually online. So I go shopping actually on the US U-Haul website. If you buy 8 blankets, I believe you get like a major discount. I think it might be free shipping. I live in Canada, but that's what I do. I usually buy at least 8 blankets at a time. They last forever. And yeah, so I'm going to leave a link below of the website, but I think it's just uhaul.com, and that's where I purchase it. The second most frequently asked question is, do you have to use U-Haul? That is a big no. You do not have to. There's a bunch of alternatives that you could use. There's towels, which would be the most common replacement, because like, who can't get towels? Everybody could get towels. I have a bunch of towels in my house right now. So I would recommend towels. The biggest downside about towels is they take forever to dry, they're much heavier, and I find that the scent, like, it holds the scent a bit better, which isn't great because you don't want the urine smell. But it is completely, you're able to do it, no problem. You might just want to wash it more frequently and it'll take longer to dry. But it is completely possible to do it with towels. Another thing you could use is, I believe it's called Zorb. So it's a fabric that you use in diapers, in cloth diapers. That I have heard works very well. I haven't had any experience with it personally, but I did hear that it works very, very well. So the next question I have here is, what machine do I use? So this right here is my sewing machine. It's a Genome or Genome. I'm not sure how you guys say it. I say Genome. Probably wrong, but it's spelled like this. I'm not sure if you see it. Genome HD 1000. So when I was looking for a sewing machine, I wanted something heavy duty. Like, I was looking at reviews, I was looking at everything. This baby could sew through a wooden ruler. Like, guys, look that up. It's kind of really insane. So I wanted something that could sew through all the layers and layers and layers that cage liners and like guinea pig beds and all that stuff could sew through. So I got this guy. It is very pricey. You could definitely go for something cheaper if you're not sure if you like sewing. I'd for sure recommend something cheaper, so that way you have like a little introduction to it. You can always use like those cheap Walmart sewing machines and so on, but you might get very, very frustrated. What I used to use was a cheap Walmart sewing machine, and it took me hours and hours and hours to sew a line because it kept jamming up, it kept breaking, it just kept causing me a bunch of problems. But it is for sure possible to do it with a cheap sewing machine. My next question is, what fleece do you use? So I'm not sure if you guys are aware of, but there's multiple different fleece fabrics. I suggest anti-pill fleece fabrics, but you could pretty much use any kind of fleece that you want to, pretty much. Anti-pill would be the best, but the other ones, there's no problem with it. Just whatever you have access to. I've used fleece fabric from Joann's. I've used it from Fabricville, Fabricland, which those two are Canadian fabric stores. I've used it from a local fabric store. I've bought in a $5 roll from Walmart before and used that to make the cage liners. Actually, I have a few $5 fleece rolls over in the corner of my room right now, just waiting to be used. Another question I get is, where do I get my fleece? I pretty much just answered it. Online, in person, wherever the heck. Fabric stores, Walmarts, even thrift stores would probably have some fleece blankets that you could use. If you guys have ever noticed, on the top of my guinea pig cages, to just make them feel a bit more comfortable, I have a blanket. It's actually a fleece blanket, and we got that at a thrift store, so like you could pretty much get it anywhere you look. Another questions I get is how many fleece layers that I use. So I use 2 fleece layers. I recommend you guys to use 2 fleece layers. So if you looked at my video, I have one on top and one at the bottom. First off, the biggest reason I use 2 fleece layers is because I love like the variety. So like I can have a unicorn theme one day and then a Valentine's Day theme the other day. Like I can have Christmas on one side and unicorns on the other side. So I like the variety of patterns. I really love the patterns. It's kind of why I have a lot of fleece. But another thing is, personally, I feel, I haven't tested this yet, but I feel like you need something to protect the U-Haul when you're washing it. So that's what the fleece does. If you've ever washed U-Haul and put it through the dryer, you'll see that it shrinks a lot, and like it'll take off like a bunch of bits because it's pretty much recycled denim. That's what U-Haul is. But I would just recommend you guys to stick with 2 layers of fleece there. Another question is how many layers of U-Haul that I use. So the U-Haul is between the fleece, the stuff that absorbs it. I've used 2. I've used 1. 2 is thicker, it's more plush, it's cozier, it might be warmer during the winter months, it absorbs a lot more. I prefer the 1 because, for one, it's easier to sew, it's easier on my sewing machine. I always have beds available for my guinea pigs in it. It's still pretty cozy, and I also have like a litter box system. So I either have pee pads where they pee frequently, so that way it doesn't really, like, of course they'll pee in their cage liners, but it's not like insane huge puddles. Another thing is I have like a litter box system where I put all their hay in it, and that's where they pee. They pee and they poop where they eat. So that's just a couple things to keep in mind. There's nothing wrong with 2 layers, but I just prefer making 1 layer. It's a lot easier for me to make. My next question is how much seam allowance that I put on my cage liners. So this varies. It depends if I lose my pattern or not. I like cutting out a pattern so all my cage liners are the same size. So I would say a minimum of 4 inches that I make as a seam allowance. So like technically like 1 inch or half an inch is actually the seam allowance, and like 3, 4, I'd say probably up to 6 inches is to allow for shrinkage. So I always recommend at least 3 to 4 inches, just in case. They do shrink quite a bit. They get really weird shapes sometimes, so I recommend 3 to 4 inches. That way forever you'll have coverage on your cage, even when it does shrink a little bit. My next question is, how do you wash and dry your cage liners? So I'm going to make a video on how to do this. So check the description box below, and I will link you guys to the video when I make it. But for now, I'm just going to do a quick outline. You grab it, you brush it all off. You don't want that hay and that hair in your washing machine. You chuck it in the wash, and you chuck it in the dryer. Do not put it on high heat. Put it on low heat or air dry if possible. Or hang it up around your house or on a clothesline if it's summertime. And that's it, clean. So it's not too hard. It's almost like any regular laundry, but I will make a more detailed video on how to do that in the near future. Another frequently asked question is, can you hand sew a cage liner? So yes, you can for sure hand sew a cage liner. It's a lot of work. It's very, very hard. With a sewing machine alone, it takes a lot of time. So hand sewing is going to take much longer. I recommend to have one of something like this too, if you do hand sew it, because it's a lot of layers. So like these kinds of things you put at the end of your finger and you push the needle through. So if it's a lot of layers, I would really recommend something like these guys here. That way you could push the needle through. I personally really recommend using a sewing machine to save so much time. But if you only have a needle and thread, you could go ahead and do it. If you guys do it, let me know in the comment below, because like, that's freaking awesome, guys. My next question is, how much does everything cost? Like, how much does the fabric cost? How much does the U-Haul cost? How much does it cost? So it varies hugely depending on where you live, if you've got sales going on, what you use, also if you count the time that you put in, because if you guys know, purchasing them are quite expensive. So first off, for fleece, I'd say fleece is between probably $5 to $10. This is Canadian dollars, just saying. Probably similar in US, but it depends if you go on the clearance rack. If you go on the clearance rack, you might even get as cheap as like $2 to $3 if you're really, really freaking lucky. But I'm just gonna say average out $5 to $10 per meter. So I'd say, or per yard or meter, they're pretty similar in dimensions. So let's say you need 2 yards of that. So I'm gonna say $7. It's dead in the middle. I often see fleece on for $7, so $14 just for the fleece. For the U-Haul, it really, really depends on if you get the deal, if you buy the 8 U-Haul blankets, if you only buy 1, if you have to pay shipping. It really, really depends. I say it's $8 per blanket. That's how much I've paid in the past. I haven't bought U-Haul in like 3 or 4 years. Just because I buy so many at once. But I would say it's $8 a blanket, so that raises it up to $22. So $22 in fabric. There is your thread. Thread could be pretty expensive. I'd say probably $3 to $5 depending. I usually often see them for $5, so add another $5, that's $27. Your needles, those could be pricey. I don't have a price estimate for that. Your whole sewing machine, we're just going to assume you've got one, or if you're hand sewing. Let's just assume you have the needles and the means to sew it. So that's a general outline of how much everything costs for like a fabric and stuff like that, and the things that you physically need. But then a huge part of this is the time. How much time do you have? How much time could you afford? So this would be a huge tiebreaker whether you buy them or make them. So a regular 1 cage liner could take hours. Like, the more you make it, the more things you have, the faster it goes. Like, if you make a pattern, that way you don't have to measure out every single time you make it. It might cut off some time. But making the pattern takes extra time to make. If you're good at sewing, if your sewing machine jams up, if you're having problems with your sewing machine, it's thick layers, so you have to go slow and steady. Like, there is so many things. If you have a good sewing machine, you'll go faster. If you have an old sewing machine, you'll go slower. So how much time does it usually take me to make it? I'd probably say 3 to 4 hours from start to finish, at least that much. If I have a pattern, I would say 3 to 4 hours. The more I make it, the faster I'm at it. But this is with a good sewing machine and everything. 3 to 4 hours sounds about right. So that is really insane amount of time. And if you guys are wondering why they're so expensive, that's why. Because let's say it did take me 4 hours. Let's say minimum wage is like $11 an hour. That's $44 worth of work that I just put in to make 1 single cage liner. So yeah, I just thought that I'd put that out there. So another question is, can a guinea pig get under the cage liner? Yes, they can. It's not very frequent that they do. From my knowledge, I haven't had my guinea pigs go under any cage liners, but as long as I had something in the cages to keep them on top of it. So if they go under a lot, maybe they want somewhere to hide. of course, that's why they'd be going under the cage liner. So I put hidey houses, I put a fleece curtain to give them a little bit of privacy, I put in beds, I put in food. The more stuff you have on top of the cage liners, the less likely they are going to go under the cage liners. They also make cage liners with sides. I don't have that on a tutorial, but you pretty much just make sides that you can fit over the sides of your cage. I haven't had to make any of those, so it just really depends on your guinea pig and what you have inside of your cage. I don't think it's necessary to have the sides, but if you guys do, you could definitely make the sides over it. So the next question is, with both sides having a fleece side to it, do you have to flip the cage liners between washes, or do you have to wash it every time for each side that's dirty? You would have to wash it every single time that it gets, once it gets dirty, because the thing is, there's two absorbent layers in the middle, and once those absorbent layers are soiled, if you flip the cage liner on the other side, it's still soiled. So the surface would be clean, but the inside would still be soiled. So you'd have to clean it. I recommend at least once a week. My final question that I've got for you guys today is, do U-Haul blankets last? Do cage liners last? So for me, they have. I think it depends on how well they're made and how much you use them and how big is your cage. Because if it's a smaller cage, it'll get soiled more, they'll be used more, they'll be washed more. It also depends what's the center layer, if it's U-Haul. So it depends on a lot of things, but for me, they've lasted well over 3, 4, 5 years. It really depends on how well you take care of them, and it also depends if you hang to wash or if you put them in the dryer. You could hand wash or machine wash. It depends if your machine is a newer machine or an older machine. So for me, they've lasted good 5 years. They would probably have lasted even longer than that. So it just depends on who's made them, how well they're made, and the quality, and so on. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I don't make a lot of them face to face like this, but I hope to see you guys next time on next video.